All right, salespeople are dealing with cognitive biases on a daily basis when it comes to their prospects, but they often have no idea what's happening. And some of the latest research on cognitive biases, if you're aware of them and you actually use some of the techniques that these scientists are suggesting, it can help you a lot in sales. So we came here to UCSD, one of the top neuroscience campuses in the country, to talk about what are the top cognitive biases happening in the sales process right now, and how can you use applied neuroscience techniques to start to shift the way you're communicating, the way you're acting in a sales process, so you don't have to interact and bump against those cognitive biases and have the bad results that you don't want. How do you shortcut that and get better results faster? The first cognitive bias I wanted to share with you is called transference. What the heck is transference? The easiest way to explain it is, have you ever been in a situation where somebody's accusing you of doing something or being something that you're not because of something they've experienced in the past? So an easy example of this is a lot of times in dating, right? Where sometimes a new boyfriend or new girlfriend has to explain, I'm not like your ex, I'm a totally new person. Well, that can happen a lot in sales. So what's happening a lot of times with buyers is they're experiencing transference with two different distinct parts of the selling process. The first one is they're transferring all the old sales behaviors of salespeople that they've not liked onto you as a salesperson. Number two is sometimes they're transferring product buying decisions, maybe things that they're not happy with. They're projecting and transferring those bad experiences onto you in your sales process. So let's talk a little bit more about number one, where you as a salesperson, they might have some baggage. They might be transferring old, bad salespeople onto you. So the couple examples of that might be a salesperson's too pushy, a salesperson maybe had sold them the wrong product, a salesperson didn't actually know what they were doing, a salesperson maybe never talked to that lead again after they actually made the purchase. So how can you avoid having a prospect transfer all the old selling bad behaviors of another salesperson onto you? From an applied neuroscience perspective, you have to do what's called distinction. You have to create more distinction between you and the new conversation you're having with your prospect. So as an example, a couple things you can do to create distinction between you and that bad sales experience they've had in the past is you can act more neutral. So a lot of times when somebody's had a bad experience with a bad salesperson, that salesperson was overly certain. They're sitting there going, this is absolutely the right fit for you. I know for sure this is going to work. They're extra pushy. So what can you do to create distinction? Now, from a cognitive bias perspective, people are always transferring behaviors from other people that are like you onto you. So again, the best thing you can do is create distinction. This is applied neuroscience. So to create distinction, you start to separate yourself from that salesperson through how you're behaving. And one of the things you can do is you can say, well, let me just make sure we can help you in the first place. I'd like to ask you some more questions just to make sure that we actually do have the right fit for you. Now, the bad salesperson they've talked to in the past is going, look, we've got a great special this weekend. I know this is going to be a good fit for you. Let's get started today, right? That's something probably they may have had some bad experiences with. And now when it comes to products. So let's say somebody has bought some products or services that they later had buyer's remorse about. Buyers can have projection and transference onto your product or service because of bad experiences they've had in the past. So what's an example of that? Maybe they bought a product or service that they never used before. Maybe they bought a product or service the company went out of business. Maybe they bought a product or service and their team never used it. Well, you see that a lot in different softwares that companies buy. Is an executive can make a purchasing decision, and next thing you know, they try to onboard it to a team, and there's all sorts of integration problems, there's all sorts of problems with adoption. That can be problematic. So how do you handle that bias of transference? Again, as a salesperson, you're going to be experiencing this as your buyer's going to be giving you all sorts of resistance. They may not be telling you the truth. They may be acting in a way that you think, this is a really slam dunk product. I know this is going to help the company, but what's going on? Why is this executive resistant? Well, it's probably they're transferring either an old salesperson onto you, or they're transferring an old product or service decision-making and purchase onto you as well. So what ends up happening is you need to tell a few different types of stories when it comes to your product. One of the things that I like to teach is you need to validate that those transferences are correct. That's one of the top ways to distinguish yourself and distinguish your product or service. And you can even call out that elephant in the room, and you can say, I know sometimes in the past when people make purchasing decisions that have to do with software or XYZ or roofing or whatever it may be, I know that there's some companies out there that don't always do a great job. Or sometimes the onboarding ends up being terrible. Or sometimes you can buy a product or service and it doesn't end up ever really getting implemented. We see that all the time, sir or ma'am. Here's what we do to solve that. Another thing you can do is tell your company's story. So you've heard some pretty famous things before called like start with why as an example. If you tell the why behind what you do as a salesperson, that's going to create more distinction for you as a salesperson, but also your company. So if you tell the why of your company on a sales call, that's going to help, again, create more distinction, tying it all back to this cognitive bias. Here's another example of a salesperson that can create more distinction between them and a salesperson of the past. Is if as a salesperson, you allow that prospect to go through a brand new journey with you versus acting like you've been down this road 100 times before, that really is helpful. So one of the sales mistakes that people make is they try to act like I've been here before, I've done this so many times, this is easy for me, your question's actually dumb, I get this all the time. People don't like that. Like imagine if you went to talk to a therapist or psychiatrist and that person immediately watched your body language as they came into the room. And in a lot of ways, these psychiatrists they're that talented. And they say, I know exactly what's going on with you, here's what you need to do. That's a really bad experience for the actual person who's going in. And similarly, if a prospect is in your sales process and you're just acting like, I know it all, let's just get through this. I have all the questions answered. I know I do this all day for a living. What ends up happening is you rob that prospect of taking a journey with you as a salesperson. So it's actually really powerful to pretend as if a sales conversation you're having is even the first conversation that you're having ever on this particular topic. And you're experiencing these new feelings and these new thoughts with your prospect at the same time. A lot of times when somebody's had a bad experience with a salesperson, the salesperson isn't acting that genuine. They're not sitting there really being exploratory with the prospect. They're sitting there being overly certain, overly confident, and they're kind of downplaying the individuality of that prospect. So again, remember that when you're trying to create more distinction between you and other salespeople in the past, to make sure that people don't transfer onto you a bad experience from another salesperson, is really go there with them and take them through a brand new journey with you as if you've never had that conversation before. It's much more powerful. You'll have more fun. You'll have more energy. Your prospects will buy from you more regularly. Remember, your sales leads, the very first second that they say hello to you, they're projecting and they're transferring all of the experiences between any sales conversation or any product or service they've ever bought onto this new conversation. So keep in mind to create more distinction, more separation between your product or service and you yourself as a salesperson in order to eliminate that cognitive bias from your sales process. If you enjoyed this video, please let us know in the comments. Make sure to like and of course subscribe. We've got a lot more content just like this coming out that you won't want to miss.